Hi, I'm Anne from Mall Mill Library, and I'm here today to show you how you can sew a simple knit headband like the one I'm wearing in about 5 or 10 minutes. It's really simple, doesn't take any special materials. You probably already have everything you need hanging around your house, which is awesome right now when it's kind of hard to get out and get the things. All you're going to need is a sewing machine and a scrap of knit fabric that's 6 inches by 18 inches. So the first step to making a knit headband is to cut your fabric. You're going to need to cut a piece of fabric that is like 6 inches tall by roughly 18 to 20 inches long. And the reason why there's kind of a range in that length is because different knit fabrics have different amounts of stretch. And that stretch is what's going to have this knit headband like sit snug around our head. So like this yellow piece that I'm going to be using in the example today, I cut from like a t-shirt, like a man's t-shirt, and those tend to not have very much stretch because they're kind of like big and boxy and loose. So when I pull this, there's like some stretch, but it's not like this is about as far as it's going to stretch. Whereas this headband right here, I made from a much stretchier knit fabric. Let me show you right here, like, woo, see how like the difference of that, like between that and this. There's not much stretch here, a lot of stretch here. So this would be like, if you were using this kind of stretch, 18 inches would be the right amount. If you're using this amount of stretch, like probably 19 or 20 inches. One thing you could do if you're not sure is to just take the fabric and kind of like put it around your head and see kind of where it feels comfortable with a little bit of stretch, and then add like an inch, because that's what we're going to use for our seam allowance. You also, I will tell you, pay attention to the direction of the stretch, because sometimes like with this like knit fabric, some is oftentimes stretchier one direction than another. Sometimes it's stretchy only like with this, it's stretchy this way, but not stretchy at all that way. So we want to have the most stretch be like the length, again, because we want to have it like sit snug around our head. So we've got our fabric 6 inches tall by 18 to 20 inches long. And we're going to fold it in half the long way. And then we're going to sew down this line right here all the way down with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. But we're going to leave a hole about 1 inch long right here. And that's going to be what we use to turn this right side out later. Now, to sew and knit fabric on a regular sewing machine, you're going to need to use a stretch stitch. Otherwise, when you stretch your knit fabric, if your stitch doesn't stretch with you, it'll pop, and that'll make you sad. So some machines have like specific stretch stitches. Sometimes they look like 3 kind of parallel lines, like a triple stitch. Sometimes there's ones that people call like a lightning bolt stitch that looks like a lightning bolt. My machine isn't that fancy. I just use a zigzag stitch, and I've got it set with a width and a length of 2. So it's kind of a small, narrow stitch, but it still has that stretch. Also, you'll see that I'm sewing with like dark brown thread. I'm doing that just so you can see what I'm doing. Obviously, if I was sewing this one for reals, I would be sewing like with a matching thread. So here we go. Now I'm going to stop. I'm going to go about 1 inch forward, and I'm going to start again. Let's see if y'all can see this. Ooh, those threads. I've brought my fabric back over to my work table so you can see what we've got. You can see we've got a zigzag stitch that starts here, leaves about 1 inch open and goes all the way down. And when I pick this up and stretch it, you can see that that zigzag stretches with the fabric. So now what we need to do is we need to turn this like halfway inside out, and I'll show you what I'm talking about. I'm gonna go try and see if I can get this. I need to pull this through the end, so it's sometimes, I think, easier to just kind of work your hands in as far as you can. And grab a hold of that. I think I just lost it. There it is. There. And I'm not going to turn it all the way inside out. I want to get just so that I get this end out. So then it's going to be kind of like that. So it's halfway turned. And I want to make sure that I get my seams lined up right there. So you see, this is that's our turning hole. We want to make sure that this hole stays on the outside. And you can see I've got it just halfway turned right side out. What we're going to do next is we're going to take it to the machine and we're going to sew all the way around this circle right here. To sew a small circle, it's easier if you put your presser foot inside and work it around that way. So I've got my presser foot inside my circle. And you see, I'm just going to kind of work it around. I'm just going to sew a little bit, maybe a ½ inch or an inch, and then rotate my circle around it. If your seam allowances don't match up exactly right, or mine aren't, that's fine. It's just a blend. Also, when you're doing this, be very careful. You'll notice that I'm not putting my hand on top of the presser foot. This is kind of like my danger area. I always keep my hands off of the presser foot so that I don't accidentally sew my hand or my finger. We're almost there. Got it. And so you can see that we've sewn all the way around that circle. Now we're going to turn it right side out through this hole. This is the seam we just sewed all the way around that circle. Now let's find the hole that we left open and let's turn it right side out through that hole. It's going to be tight because that's kind of a small hole, but knit stretches, so that hole will stretch for you. There we go. Now all that's left is to finish off this hole. You can do this a couple of ways. Let's go ahead and get this rotated around. I like to have the seam kind of at the back. Okay, so you can actually, if you like, you could use a needle and thread and just hand sew that closed. That would be the way that would show the least. You could do like a little ladder stitch is what it's called. You just kind of take a stitch here, 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 all the way across. You pull it tight and you won't be able to see those stitches. Another option is to take this to your machine and just sew a little bitty seam right there, just straight stitch. That will show, but if you think about it, this is probably going to be underneath your hair anyway, because this is the seam. It's not going to be the part that's going to show. And if you're super, super lazy, you could also just leave it and not even sew it, because knit fabric won't fray, so it could stay there like that. And that's it. There's your knit headband. So if you want to know how to do this hand stitch, let's see if I can show it to you. I've got my thread already in there. I'm going to take a stitch off of this side. I'm going to take a stitch off of this side of the hole. Little bitty stitch. And you see it just closes it right up. Stitch off of this side. Stitch off the other side. And just close it right back up. And you can keep doing that stitch off of this side. Stitch off of this side. And see how that closes up that hole and you don't see those stitches? You just do that all the way across and then notch your thread. Tie it off. And we're done. Your headband is finished. And all it took was just that one piece of fabric and two really, really easy seams. Thanks for hanging out with me today.